The Witch is an independent but sophisticated work that narrates how a noble family in England in 1630, a Christian colonial couple with 5 children, live in a forest. According to popular beliefs, it is dominated by evil. One day, the newborn son disappears, and a living hell begins for the family. Director Robert Eggers spent years researching the period in which his film is set. The Salem witch trials of 1692 would be the culmination of that era. With its result of 19, it encompasses deaths in prison. But this brutal murder is just the most infamous incident. The reality is that the witches were 1 or 2 middle-aged women living together. The Puritans believed that the devil found it easier to access the body of a woman. This persecution has its basis in the way the Puritan society viewed women as more predisposed to sin. Even more so, they did not fit the strict religious expectations. For example, as happens with the protagonists of the film. If you don't have children when most give birth, besides that the witch is also counted as the scarcity that influenced these dark legends. Rotten food was another evil attributed to witches. A Nightmare on Elm Street, the horror classic by Wes Craven, needs little introduction. Several young people often have nightmares about a man with a deformed face and a glove ending in sharp blades. Suddenly, some of them start to be murdered in their sleep, by this being called Freddy Krueger. Craven was inspired by a Los Angeles Times article about a refugee child who had survived the death camps in Cambodia. He told his parents that he was afraid that if he fell asleep, someone would chase him in his dreams and always catch him. It was made clear this was no nightmare, but something very real, so they tried to stay awake for days. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought the crisis had ended. However, that same night they heard screams, and when they reached the room, the little one had passed away. Deliver us from evil in this horror thriller. A police officer who is dedicated to investigating a series of murders must be accompanied by a priest expert in exorcism, as the murders seem to be related to demonic possessions. The protagonist of the film, portrayed by Eric, is a New York Police Department agent who specialized in paranormal cases. The film is based on more than 20 cases of demonic possessions and exorcisms on the streets of New York. Plastic Interior, among others by Steven Spielberg, about a middle-class American family experiencing strange phenomena. The Unidex Wall Appearance article. Tell me about the paranormal phenomena for which there is no possible explanation. It all began to occur on February 3rd, 1950, in the class of the first-year students. German, the teenage son, witnessed outbursts from various locations in the house. Bottle without a cap, inches in the rooms without reason, and they do the same. But I was at home, and I could see on streaming. I was listening again to those I have brought here, commented terrible story, and 30 kilo, that I inform you. The detective police officers made various noises and scattered items haphazardly throughout the area as the car was driven, until a Catholic priest of around 20 years of age arrived to enter and bless the house. All the documents recovered were found to be from some kind of bestial spa or bathing facility. The objects were no longer just bottles. If one was to think that the presence of hormonal teenagers had opened the possibility of psychokinesis. One day, the events came to a halt. On February 3 and March 10, over 70 mysterious incidents were reported. Terror and adolescence. A group of young people live in sheer terror of a dreadful psychopath. A cult film that defines the horror cinema of its entire era. Screenwriter Kevin Williamson's inspiration came from a notorious serial killer who terrorized Floridians in the 1990s. He was infamously known as the Ripper of Game, as he violated and murdered 5 students in August 1990. Additionally, he was responsible for a murder in Chile in the past. This killer clearly hides a history of violence. His father, a police officer, abused his mother and brother. However, the manner in which this murderer treated his victims, mutilating, decapitating, and positioning them in obscene poses in front of mirrors, is unjustifiable. Veronica creates a Ouija board with her friends and begins to experience terrifying supernatural presences that threaten to harm her and her entire family. Perhaps the most famous paranormal event in Spain, alongside the Belmes house in 1992, was when a young woman from the Vallecas neighborhood, named Estefania Gutierrez, conducted a seance. Months later, She died in the hospital after suffering convulsions and seeing shadowy figures. But things are about to get even stranger when, a year after his death, his parents call the police because they are experiencing paranormal activity. The initially skeptical police force ended up hearing strange and incorporeal noises that led them to describe the situation in the police report as one of mystery and rarity. A review of the 1970s film, featured on the Communal Family account, discusses a grand mansion, despite the troubling history that a tragic event took place within its walls. Not long ago, the alarmed and horrified individuals quickly detected the malicious presence in this house and sought the help of a priest to address the situation. The paranormal has been the subject of one of the debates among believers and non-believers on November 13, from 4 to 7. Ronald DeFeo Jr. shotgunned his father and rendered his family unfit in their MTB home in New York. Ruben told Leo that they forced a guilty person, who was sentenced to 25 years in prison, to withdraw from school for a year. The family reported paranormal events. For 15 minutes they heard gunshots during the meeting. I had an imaginary friend with whom I would engage in fanciful, wishful thinking. In my imaginings, I would envision myself occupying a unique and treasured position, akin to a coveted corner of desire, that was the focus of longing and yearning. Finally, the Lutz family fled that chilling place after spending 28 days in seclusion. This masterpiece of the horror genre, directed by John Carpenter, begins when a team of researchers discovers a strange entity from outer space. Scientific estimates indicated the entity had been buried in snow for over 100 years. Thousands of years ago, as it does, the end of the world begins. Though it may seem mad, they exist. The matter is going to be an article, and the New York Times dated 1950 had a title along the lines of "A flying saucer approaches the Earth," discussing a theory. It appears that 4 Philadelphia police officers found a strange and sticky material, and when one of them tried to move the substance, it began to dissolve and evaporate, leaving nothing to show to anyone except a stain on the ground. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a gem. If you enjoy horror and legal drama, this film has both, and also features elegant direction that will make you ponder the most important dilemma of humanity: faith or reason. Emily Rose begins to suffer hallucinations, loses consciousness, and experiences paranormal phenomena with increasing frequency and intensity. Emily decided to turn to a priest and undergo an exorcism. However, she dies, and the priest is accused of homicide. This is the story of this trial, and of some facts as chilling as they are difficult to explain. The young woman was not called Emily, but rather Analysis, Michael. She was 17 years old with the same symptoms as depicted in the film. They diagnosed her with epilepsy and prescribed her medication to help. However, the medication had no effect, while the symptoms worsened, convulsions and visions. Analyst felt a sense of urgency and focused on her faith 600 times a day until the ligaments in his knee tore at the age of 23. He had taken dozens of different medications, and he was subjected to 67 exorcisms in just 10 months. Ultimately, he stopped eating and died of starvation in 1976.
Warren File, The Spell, or Three of Those from Ed Monologues, and The Warren Kings, played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. We witness the supernatural encounters of the El Peron family, terrorized by the presence on their farm of an evil being. Pep and the Warren Kings are in fact very real. These paranormal investigators dedicated their lives to helping people who had terrifying experiences. Specifically, this film is based on the case of a family who, after moving to Rhode Island in 1971, terrifying events such as floating or moving moves, doors, sounds opening and closing, incorporeal. Even one of the family members was pushed and injured by invisible spirits. When the Warrens arrived, they discovered that there was a spirit in the house, particularly Malevuelo, named Bathsheba, a 19th century woman accused of being satanic and of assigning her own son.